there friend, and welcome to this technique tutorial. In this video I'm going to be showing you how you can create a raised petal ready for your flowers, and really this just gives each of the petals on the flower just a bit more kind of definition, a bit more of a raised texture, and it's just a bit more of an advanced way to kind of level up some of your florals. So you'll also have access to this sampler pattern that I've drawn on the fabric here that you can see in the video, and this is so that you can give this a good practice if you'd like to. We've got two different versions here, so I'm going to show you one petal, just ordinary satin stitch, how we would normally fill it in, and then I'm going to show you how we can create a petal that is raised. Now admittedly on the camera they might look relatively similar at the end, but in person you will really see that really raised texture and definition. So I really do encourage you to do a side by side, purely so that you can see the difference that this technique kind of has on creating really lovely raised petals. So as I said, the first one I'm just going to do a quick satin stitch petal. I'm going to speed this up and catch up with you to show you what the purpose of this tutorial is, and that is the raised petal. So there is our completed petal, just with the regular satin stitch. It's very flat to the fabric, just like we would expect from our normal stitching, and that is what it would look like ordinarily. Now I'm going to show you how you can create a raised petal, and that's going to give the kind of outer edge of the petal that raised and 3D texture, so that when you are stitching florals like this, then you can just give it a bit more dimension. So then, in order to create this raised section at the end, the best way to do that is actually by using a bullion knot. If you don't know how to do a bullion knot yet, then fear not, we have a tutorial inside of the Bloom Stitch library that explains it in a much slower pace than what I'm going to be sharing with you now. But once you've done a couple of these, you really do get the hang of them. And the beauty of using them on this purpose is that they do get covered over with stitching afterwards, so they don't need to be perfect. They don't need to be really neatly wound or anything like that, because we're going to be stitching straight over them. Give it a good practice. You've got lots of different petals here where you can give it a go and see how you get on. So essentially what we're going to be doing is creating a knot that is going to sit along the top edge of this petal. So I'm going to be bringing the needle up at one side, and it's really important that we're not kind of creating this knot right on the line that we have drawn for the petal. You can see that I've come just inside of our petal shape, and I'm going to be going down once again just inside the petal shape on the other side. As with a normal bullion knot, I'm going to leave a big loop, bring my needle up originally where we first came up, and leave my needle sticking out. And then I'm just going to wind my thread as if it was kind of like a French knot. I'm going to be wrapping that thread around the needle several times to create that bullion knot. So I'm just going to shimmy that down. And essentially we want enough wraps so that it fills the top of the petal here. So you can see there, that almost fills that space. I am just going to do another wrap or two, because they do condense down quite a lot by the time you pull them through. So I'm happy with that. I'm going to grab hold of those wraps and pull that needle all the way through. A bit fiddly to get on the camera because it's all fingers and thumbs, but I'm going to pull that all the way through. Still pulling just to make sure we get that really lovely knot, and then we pop our needle down at the end, like so. So now it depends kind of how much height you want here, and also how much of it you want kind of raised. If you only want the outer edge of the petal raised, then one bullion knot here will be enough, and we just stitch over the top. If you'd like a bit more kind of raised texture at the top, or even if you want the whole petal to be raised, you could just continue creating bullion knots all the way down the petal. I'm going to make one more just below this one. Just because I want there to be a bit more texture. And because this is quite a large petal, I want to make sure that it's really obvious that it's raised. And then again, pop the needle down. Like so. And as I said before, it really does depend how much texture you want here. If you wanted, you could even do another knot that goes over this one, if you wanted even more dimension. But I'm quite happy with the height of that. And that's going to create some really lovely texture off the fabric. So once we've created our bullion knots to create that really lovely texture, then all we're going to be doing is the exact same as what we would do for a normal satin stitch petal, and we're just going to stitch directly over the top. So I'm going to bring my needle up at the top of that petal, and then down at the bottom. And if you see me lifting the thread like this, that just means I'm straightening it out so that it lies really nice and flush and flat to the fabric. That just prevents any twists, and it just helps it sit a bit nicer. And I teach all of that inside of the Satin Stitch workshop, so if you haven't done that one yet, then do go and give that one a watch. It's a really great one. A lot of our members love it. So again, it might be quite tricky to see from the camera here, but there's quite a considerable gap here underneath where my needle is, and you might even be able to see the shadow just from the natural light in my studio, that this thread is creating a shadow on the fabric. So there is quite a big gap underneath this stitch here, which is perfect. That's exactly what we want in this situation. Normally when there's a gap, it means your stitching is loose and you're not using the right tension, but we have created this by putting these bullion knots in, and that's the whole point, is to create this kind of raised texture at the top here. So I'm going to go ahead with the next stitch, and I'm going to follow the usual rule of satin stitching, again, that I very much teach inside of the workshop if you've not seen it, but it's my method of using full stitches and half stitches, just to help us get the right curve and the right direction. We do also have another technique tutorial on satin stitch direction. I will link that one below just so that you can go and give that one a watch as well, and that just shows how you can kind of create the right direction with your stitching. You know, like for things like flowers, we don't want every line being dead straight, we want it to point in towards the centre of the flower. And this method of what I call kind of a full stitch then a half stitch, it just helps to really ensure you're getting that direction. But as I said, we go over that in a lot more detail inside of the stitch direction tutorial, and there is a lovely sampler pattern there for you to give it a go as well. So I'm going to speed this up now and catch up with you when we get towards the end. So then that is that one now completed, and again, you really may not be able to see the difference on the camera, but I can hugely see the difference here. If anything, I actually could have gone a bit more with this texture. There's a lot of raised definition over here, but not quite as much on this side, so I probably could have even added a few more bullion knots in there to give it even more 3D texture. But I can definitely see the difference between these two, considering they are the exact same shape, just stitched, one raised and one flat to the fabric. So I now encourage you to give one of these flowers or both of these flowers a go, trying different types of bullion knots, different sizes of knots, different numbers of knots, and seeing whether you find kind of a sweet spot of how raised you like the petals to be. I'm going to go and do this one more time on this one here, and I'm going to create even more knots in this one to see if we can really make a difference with how much texture this actually ends up having. So I'm going to create a smaller knot right at the top. Just to make sure we're really getting the top rounder part of that petal. These ones were a bit flatter at the top, so we could kind of go straight in with that longer bullion knot, but because this one is slightly more rounded, you can add in a really tiny bullion knot at the top. I'm now going to add in another one. So this time I've created 3 knots, and it is a slightly smaller petal, so we should have a lot more dimension and texture for this particular one. So then I'm going to do the same thing again and satin stitch over the top. So there's that one completed now as well. And again, you probably still can't see on the camera, but this one is a lot kind of more rounder, raised and textured than even the example one we've done here, because I've created even more bullion knots underneath that satin stitch, and it's just created such a lovely textured and dimensional petal. I really encourage you to give this a go yourself to really see the impact. I think it really shows so much more in person than it does on camera, and I'm excited to see how you get on with it and whether or not you like it. As always, friends, do share your progress with us in the community, and we will all be cheering you on every step of the way. Happy stitching!